This time we're going to take a look at the text cells in the Colab notebook. So we can go again to Google Colab, but this time I'm already signed in. So now when I enter the Google Colab website, it will give me this page where I can, for example, have the recent files that I've used. I can have some examples here. I can access files that are in my Google Drive. I can access files from a GitHub, for example, if I type here the GitHub address. And I can also upload a notebook from my computer. So this time we are going to start a new notebook. So Google Colab is creating this new empty notebook, and I'm going to add a text cell. So now here we see that we have here a code cell. Here we have a text cell that we can double click to edit. And I can also move this cell up if I want to. So a text cell is a cell that by its name we can add some text. So this is a text cell. We also have these icons here that can help us to, for example, have something in bold or something in italic. Headings. We can also insert an image. We can have some numbered list, unnumbered bullet list. We can have some horizontal rule, and we can reposition the Markdown preview from here right to the bottom. So this is a text cell, but we are not limited to only simple text. We can also use what is called the Markdown language. So Markdown is a markup language that we can use to add formatting elements to plain text. So it's very used. If you are familiar with GitHub, you can see that we can use the Markdown there. And in general, we have these short codes, let's call it, for certain, if you want to write some text in bold or if you want to do some heading. So basically, in a nutshell, Markdown has this kind of code that's stored in plain text format, and then there's this Markdown application that it's able to parse or to read this Markdown formatted text and output in HTML. So in general, for every Markdown formatted text, we also have the equivalent in HTML code. So for example, if we want to use a heading, we can use this. This is a heading, and we see here, and we will also see here in the table of contents. So we can use here new section. So for example, section, it appears here. If we want some text in bold, here is text bold. If we want it italic, for example, we can click. Here's here italic, which is the same as if we press here italicized text. We can also add links. This is how we use a link Markdown. So here we can put the link. Here is the address. So when we press Shift Enter here, then we have our cell with text. We can use Markdown. If I press here, then it will open like a normal link. So here we go to the markdownguy.org. We'll find there an explanation about Markdown, where you find Markdown. There's some basic syntax, the extended syntax, a cheat sheet that's very useful if you want to look how to do some certain things. See here how we insert an image, how we make a table, footnotes, and things like this. So we can see already that we have a lot of tools at our disposal just using text and also Markdown. So we've seen how we can use a text cell to use Markdown formatted cells, make use of this Markdown language, but we can also use HTML. So for example, if we go here to the let's take an example to define a table. So I'll copy this HTML code here. I'll just paste here, and we can already see this table. We can also add here some HTML for headings. But if we use a Markdown heading, it will appear here in our table of contents, but the headings used with HTML is not appearing here. If we create a section, it will create a section here for us automatically. So we need to pay attention that when we use this kind of HTML in a text cell, there will be no sections added to the table of contents. But if we use as a Markdown, then it will display here as sections. This is one peculiarity of Google Colab. Another thing that we need to have in mind is that, for example, some things, if we want to have a button here on using HTML, it would not execute, for example, a JavaScript. There are other ways how we can use HTML code in this Jupyter Colab, but for example, so there is one example here that if we click, it should appear this embedded page saying hello world. So if we copy this, add to our text cell, HTML, shows the button. However, when we click, nothing happens. So one more thing that we need to have in mind is, for example, I will add here this HTML code here. So this is the onClick event, use it to trigger a function when an element is clicked on. So we have here a button, and the idea is that when we click on this button, for example, it would appear here written hello world. So when we execute this on a text cell, nothing happens. But just as an example, I will go into details on this later. We can also execute this HTML in a code cell, and now when I click, I have the hello world here. So just need to have in mind that on the text cells we can display some HTML events, but sometimes we cannot execute JavaScript, for example. But it's very powerful. We are using a text cell to display things. As we've seen, we can display HTML tables. We can have different headings and basically everything what we have also in Markdown. We can also use in HTML, and we can have extra HTML functions to use with the text cells. So far we used plain text, we used Markdown, we used HTML, and there's one more powerful thing we can use with a text cell, and that's Latex. So Latex is a typesetting system, and it's used for technical and scientific documentation, and it's usually standard for publication of scientific documents. And we can have very nice. For example, equations. One example here. So E equals to mc squared. When we go back to Colab, if we use this notation, we have here LaTeX displayed here in the preview. Our equation. And we can also, this is an equation. We are combining text with LaTeX. We can also centralize it. So let's go to another example here of expressions. So some fractions and binomials. This example here now. And we see that we have this very powerful LaTeX integrated into LaTeX Excel, and you can find how to use LaTeX. If you're not familiar with LaTeX, I highly recommend you that you get familiar with it, because at some point in your career, if you want to write some papers, you may end up using LaTeX, and it's very convenient for a lot of things. Here's the LaTeX project page, and here overleaf.com. You also have an online editor, LaTeX editor, very convenient. If you're studying at the University of Technology, you also have access to the paid version of Overleaf, and we can have documents, collaborate together, sharing documents and things like that. So in general, we've seen that text cells, we can use simple plain text, we can use Markdown markup language, we can use HTML, and we can also use LaTeX.